Uh, Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today to this meeting of our cybernetics alignment of love/humanity discussion and meditation group, where we're trying to figure out things like what does alignment mean, what does humanity mean, what is value, and both in an abstract intellectual and lived way of knowing, with the latter being the most important. This alignment problem, our alignment problem. What does it mean for us to be aligned? And so last week's meeting was more intellectual, like focusing on category theory, and we've been doing at this point of kind of alternating, moving between more abstract and more like hands-on with respect to the nature of love and the nature of care and value, and to be a valuable being and what that might mean. So and so the time before that, we had Amelia guide us, and also Andrew, through his meditations and ways of directly working with your experience in a way that can take even the most unpleasant experiences and transmute them and perform a kind of alchemy, where you could find value even in that which seems like you cannot find any value in. And that's what life often throws at us. I'm saying this as someone who's been struggling with his stomach all week, and it has been awful. And so I was just looking forward to this meeting, to be here with all of you, because I was like, this is exactly what's needed. So hopefully Dove will be joining us soon, because he also had a practice he wanted to share with us about how to confront your experience with curiosity, and in a direct and authentic way, and in a way that has a kind of integrity that I think Dove really embodies. He's a loving warrior. That's how I feel about Dove. Anyway, so with that all being said, I'm so grateful you're all here. And Andrew, if you would please bring us home, I would be very grateful to be led by you. So.
Thank you, my friend. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time. Yeah, I wanted to basically, with your indulgence, just say a couple of things to empower this incredibly simple practice, this hand over heart practice. Don't let the simplicity belie the profundity. And so I think in somewhat of the spirit of what Adam was talking about, this may help, because if we have a stronger view in my experience of what these practices are about, we may in fact be more inspired to engage in them. And so for me, this hand over heart practice that we'll do shortly is really a practice of aligning, connecting to the present moment, and in particular to the present state of our mind and heart, our affect. And I invite you to see if in fact it's not true, somewhat what Adam was intimating, that at the end of the day, isn't it life largely about cultivating certain desirable experiences, bringing about specific states of mind? And here's the kicker. Internal states that we readily conflate with external conditions that actually bring about those states. And so if we're not aware of this, and most of us I would suspect are not, we fundamentally become addicted to external conditions that bring about these internal states. In other words, we become slaves to external circumstance, entrapped in the pursuit of conventional, conditional happiness. And so what I want to talk about is very much playfully in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence, challenging it just a little bit. This classic maxim, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, this is a non-dual practice, the simple practice. And in the non-dual traditions, pursuing happiness guarantees you'll never achieve it. True happiness is the result of cessation, not addition. And so what I'm talking about here, and what the simple practice brings about, is a true declaration of independence, which is being free of the fallacious notion of pursuit altogether, and really on one level, the human race for achievement itself. And so I suggest, I invite you to see if the following is not true for you, because this has been a game changer for me. We think we're happy, we're achieving these states of mind when we get what we want. But I invite you to see, in fact, it's not the case that we're actually happy when we stop wanting. Appearance is not in harmony with reality. In other words, we confuse the satisfaction of desire with its temporary transcendence. And this is why we never finish, we're never done with desiring and wanting, because we always think that's going to achieve our happiness. But take a very close look as a good microphenomenologist and see if it's in fact not true. You're actually not happy when you get what you want. You're actually happy when you stop wanting, when there's a moment of the release of the contraction of desire and an openness to your experience. Precisely what this goofy little practice brings about. So this hand over heart is a non-dual practice. And in the non-dual traditions, striving or pursuing denotes the absence of that which you're seeking or pursuing. And so the point here, and this is the point, and then we'll do it, you already have everything you could possibly want. You do not have to have any special experience to be free. You only need to discover that underneath it you have this fundamental wealth and richness. This leads to the non-dual point, and hand over heart practice does it. So this practice then fundamentally, and we'll do it, nurtures a type of what I playfully call industrial strength happiness, unconditional happiness, happiness and unflappable contentment that is independent of any external circumstance. And so I'll end with a statement, and then we'll do it from Krishnamurti. I love this. I don't think I've shared it before. After 70 years of teaching, he was asked, what is the secret to your unflappable contentment and happiness? And he disarmingly said, I don't mind what happens. And so for me, this practice is the practice of I don't mind what happens. I don't mind what I'm feeling. I have a mind and heart big enough to accept, say yes to, and relate to what's ever happening. So with that preface, if you're so inspired, close your eyes. Place your hand over your heart. Hold yourself, as the radical teacher Trungpa Rinpoche said, in the cradle of loving kindness. And make contact with, touch into whatever you're feeling right now. The practice is to feel it as fully as you can, but don't feed it. You know you're feeding it when you start to run commentary, Sanskrit, prapancha, conceptual proliferation. You run commentary on it, you notice that, release. Wake down into the wisdom of your body and just reconnect, realign, make contact with whatever state of mind and heart and body you're in. I start every morning with this practice, very briefly. Developing a good habit such that whenever I feel in pain, contracted, any level of unwanted experience, I automatically bring my hand to my heart, which invites the courage to feel fully whatever I'm feeling. And as Adam was intimating in his preparatory comments, even in the seemingly most unwanted of experiences, and this age is filled with so many unwanted experiences, you can find, indeed, a radical, unconditional happiness even in that, and perform the alchemy. Simply by changing your relationship to the contents of your experience. Okay, it's as simple as that. You can put your hand down. Doesn't have to be done long. In the Mahamudra and Dzogchen tradition, short sessions repeated often are actually central practice. And so this is one of the practices I do with regularity that has cultivated this quality of indestructible, unconditional happiness. So thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Andrew. Shockingly, that worked. Before, I was in a state of, oh no, I am going to prove you wrong. My stomach pain, there is no way that I can find anything in it that I can relate to and anything other than awful. And for some reason, there is more. I am surprised. Thank you. It's both fascinating the way that works, like the way, like I'm thinking like the phenomenon of reward-related analgesia, like the way in which you can actually like why placebo effects can work, like the power of them, like the power of the mind to restructure what seems so obligatory, but also like what that tells us about the nature of value and also just how necessary it is. And especially when things get hard. So um I guess so we're hoping, so last meeting, Dove was challenging us to, dive into our experience and he was going to lead us through a practice. I'm hoping he will soon, but it looks like he might not be able to join us. So instead of that, I was wondering for some length of time for whoever's here, if we could like go around sharing our experiences, what happened, and just like share openly and start discussing for some length of time and see how that goes. And then, just share presence for a while while we're all here. Would that be all right with people or? Okay, so Scott, you said you have a question, and we very grateful to. So good to see you.
See you too. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm in a coffee shop. Pretty sure. I found that really transformational, what Andrew just did, and really quite profound. And I really have a lot of philosophical questions about it. Um, I'm very curious why, and if I get too deep here, please smack me. But why did evolution make us this way? To constantly chase experiences if they're not bringing us the feeling of happiness. Why would that be adaptive over the alternative, which is the state that why isn't our default state what Andrew kind of got us into? And if there is a God, or if there is a simulation or quantum, like we know that the fundamental nature of the universe is quantum shit, as Brian Cox taught me a couple of days ago at a talk to me. Why, if we believe that to be true, isn't it like just cruel to make us this way? Doesn't that mean that our God is cruel? If we believe in God, isn't that a logical inference? Okay, I'm going to take a pause there and just see what people think.
Well, I can take a stab at it. I'm glad that the practice spoke to you for just a second. That's really wonderful. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind here, Scott. One is you spoke of evolution. Well, I think I would speak a little bit more about developmental structures of consciousness / ego. Ego is a form of arrested development. Ego is a necessary but arrested form of evolution. And so this is an egoic strategy. I'd be curious to see what Shinzen has to say about this as well from his contemplative perspective, that ego is always in constant motion. It's always looking for something other than what is, that it's never fundamentally satisfied, because ego, I think, fundamentally recognizes, as my dear friend Ruben Laukkanen neuroscientist some of you may know. He says resting in the present moment is annihilation. And so when the self-sense rests without this insatiable appetite to break away, to move, fundamentally to distract, etymologically, literally means to pull apart. That's what we're doing all the time. It's the essence of the metacrisis. Just one fracture upon the next, one dismemberment upon the next, one, breaking, fracturing, distracting away. And so this is fundamentally, in the context of evolution at a developmental level, I would argue that this is part of the developmental strategy, the arrested form of development that we know as ego structure. So something like that, but I'm curious if some of the other contemplatives listening have anything to say. Shinzen?
Why is that our default, John?
It's a constructed default. I mean, according to this is actually a really interesting point. It's a constructed default. It's not, at least according to the non-dual wisdom traditions, the non-dual reduction base, the reduction base of innate wholeness, is in fact always already present. That is the inherent default. And so this default that you're talking about or alluding to, Scott, is a secondary constructed default from the relative self-sense. So it's not an absolute default, at least according to these world wisdom traditions. It's a construct. And therefore, the invitation and the practice I led is to actually notice that, and through the process of simple cessation, relax into that space itself. This is why most of the terms connected to non-duality are in fact terms of negation or cessation. Non-duality, nirvana, nirguna, nirodha, the apophatic way. So I would contest the proclamation that this is a default. I would say it's a relative default. It's not the absolute default, at least according to the non-dualism traditions. Yeah.
Can I add something here?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think it's also a good idea to have some epistemic humility. We shouldn't assume that we know what the quote unquote evolution wants us to be. Obviously a lot of people argue that evolution wants us to reproduce and to survive, and that's the imperative first before being content. But I don't think we as humans really know what the teleological end might be. And also, what is default? We might think of default as what the adult might be, but the default for a child or a baby is to be curious, deeply curious about everything. It's like when you're in a lucid dream and you are curious about, everything that you see in this environment is produced by your own mind, and you're deeply curious. And I think if we can revert to that kind of default curious state, like a baby or like in a lucid dreamer, we actually become quite happy. And of course, the wisdom traditions talk about Satchit Ananda, that in the kind of dreamless state, we have this kind of consciousness recognizing self as being existent, and there's a natural bliss arising that. So that can also be argued as a default state. So we have both kinds of default state as conditioned by the society that we are always wanting, and we are constantly confused. But there's also a default state of like that of a child or lucid dreamer, or if you can recognize in the dreamless state what that is like, there's inherent creative blissful energy that's constantly there. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to add. Yeah.
I think that's spot on, Chi, because to me, I think one of the biggest things that's missing in so-called spiritual business these days is developmentalism, structuralism, noting exactly like you're intimating that there are different defaults depending on different structures of consciousness. And so just like you say, a child will have a different default than an adolescent, than an adult, than a transpersonalist. And so this kind of honoring the relativistic approach to this, I think, brings about this epistemic humility that you're referring to, which is really important.
You're on mute.
for me, I'm feeling very epistemically humble because I'm actually quite puzzled too, because like, I think Mao might have something interesting to say next, but like, just what I'm like, it's like natural selection, like sometimes like Richard Dawkins will describe it as like this like ruthless optimizer. So it's just like more is more. We're not intended, like happiness is like the carrot on the stick. You're not supposed to have the carrot, but you still could get a kind of more is more if you're like chasing like spectrums of, I guess, like winning. It's just life to me oftentimes does not feel that way. But I guess in theory, I don't know, maybe it's like a, like sometimes like we can be, made to like have the carrot and have it together. But, I'm very, Mao, I'd be very, very curious what you're thinking right now.
I was thinking pretty much the same thing as you and the previous speaker, which is to say, I think the question of evolution is a little bit tautological in the sense that we're not meant to anything. We exist as a condition of existing, and therefore things that lead us not to exist are volatile and change all the time. And so the ability to not be constantly on one footing and continuously seek out the possibility for that shift is actually much more adaptive than being settled in contentment, which might lead you to stop looking for those potential shifts and ultimately cease to exist, which is effectively what happens when people reach a state of enlightenment. They stop moving and they just kind of, sit there and they're happy, but they also die. So I think I'm not saying that evolution has teleology, but rather than the condition for our very existence is the fact that we sometimes touch upon those things which seem to be better fits, but we're also able to pull ourselves from that and look around again, such that potential dangers which may not be related to contentment at all are always being kept abreast of.
This makes me wonder.
I think we shouldn't assume that we know what enlightenment means. I think our friend Daniel Ingram has over 50 models of enlightenment in his book. So basically, there are over 50 definitions of enlightenment, and we shouldn't assume that if a person is quote unquote fully enlightened, the person will quote unquote cease to exist. Although we do have an example in the scientific literature of a person who is able to meditate for 7 days without sleep, without going to a bathroom, without eating, without drinking. And that person does not claim to, quote unquote, know everything, and nor does that person, quote unquote, want to cease to exist. So, of course, Andrew knows who I'm talking about, Delson Armstrong, this person. So I think it's very important for us to not assume that we know what baby is like, that baby is just driven by desire or driven, or that we know what the evolution is all about. There are some philosophers who argue, for instance, that life is kind of like an entropy reduction game, that there's this idea by futurists, which I'm very much a part of, this idea of the extropy or negative entropy, that life is kind of like the counterbalance to what we observe in non-organic life, in which there is a tendency toward chaos or disorder. Life is kind of like this kind of anti-entropic tendency. And of course, nobody really understands now this dance between entropy and extropy. What is that all about? And is there a final point to evolution? And we don't really know. That's why I kept on referring back to this kind of epistemic humility. It's just this discovery of the unfolding of mystery.
Gee, because I can say, so I just was in conversation or contact with Delson yesterday. He's a dear friend. And just for points of clarification, it's subtle, but it's nuanced, but it's important. Shinzen knows him as well. What Delson does is called Nirodha Samapati. It's the achievement of cessation. There's a difference between Nirodha and Nirvana. And so exactly like you're intimating with these 50 gradations of enlightenment, this is a marvelous microphenomenological approach to this topic, which is super important. So the cessation itself is often conflated with enlightenment, but enlightenment transcends but includes that. Cessation is not the penultimate state. And in fact, if one is not careful, these become among the most dangerous of all psychospiritual traps because they're so delicious, they're so sexy. And so this ultimate cessation is a pathway to so-called higher stages of awakening. But Delson, I'm sure, would probably agree with something like this. So I'm curious, Shinzen, you've had some contact with him as well.
Well, I'm going to propose that we invite Delson to speak for himself to the group. Well, everything you just said, Andrew, and from a Buddhology point of view, I'm professionally duty-bound to point out some other things.
Beautiful.
Most stream enterers, and yes, different teachers have different definitions of what that means, but it's a term in English that unambiguously refers to terms in Pali, Sanskrit, Tibetan, which reflects the Sanskrit, Chinese, which less reflects the Sanskrit and has Taoist influences. But there are reflections of this terminology throughout the Buddhist world. And what is called Nirodha Samapatti, exactly the words you used. And that's why you want to use those words in Pali. And if we're talking to a Tibetan person, we have to make sure that they know that those words in Tibetan often mean something different from what they mean in Southeast Asia. It gets complicated very quickly on the doctrinal confusion level. But what I would add to what you said is if we are a little bit hand-wavy and poetic as to what we mean by a stream enterer, meaning the range of things that professional teachers have called initial enlightenment or stream entry, that's definitely within range of most household practitioners, just to give a reality check. A once returner, a non-returner, an a worthy, which are other traditionally recognized levels. There's 4 of them, the 4 Arya Pugala, noble individuals is the term in Pali. So Arhat, pretty rare. I've met a few that I strongly suspect, but they were extraterrestrial. They were something else. Here's the thing, though. The attainment of Nirodha Samapatti, what our friend, this living human that will come and talk to us, what he can do, that is being confirmed by the very skeptical light of Rubin, who was mentioned, another scientist that we really respect. He's looking at it with the hard light of science. Seriously? A week? Sort of flatline? And then resurrected? That sounds like a story that 2,000 years ago became the dominant story of the West. But he's going to walk into this conversation and talk to us. And we're confirming it in the lab. What movie did we just move to be able to do this? Anyway, You can be a stream enterer, a once returner, a non-returner. You can even be an arhat and not be able to do the physiological trick that he can do. So it's also a pretty, maybe if I had to, but it might take a while. And I don't know. Maybe it's in the genes. So it's not a little thing that we're talking about putting under the microscope and telescope of science, because it looks small, but it also looks big. We're resurrecting people, sort of. Well, how does a born-again Christian who votes in the United States think? What do they think about that kind of science? Better consider, because they got to vote. So I'm saying this is all good. I'm just adding there's more.
I think we could get both Ruben and Delton on. I think that would be a very interesting.
But it's Adam's. It's Adam's.
Right, with Adams, of course, with Adams.
This is Adam's rhetoric that we're chiming in on here.
I mean, if we can get Ruben, we should reach out to him. He also wrote a very interesting paper on contemplative wisdom for superalignment recently. I've been meaning to talk to him about, but
for what?
Superalignment, like an approach to like.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Really? Huh.
He's in the chat. Yeah, so like I said, I'm both thinking like, maybe for a long time, I think I was just like projecting my own psychology onto nature and thinking like, maybe there was like just like fundamentally like all desire like is suffering, and we can only experience something like pleasure or joy from the removal of a pain. And there was always just like moving between like cybernetic entropy, and then so you're just registering like, this is you deviating from like the prediction of getting what you want, and all you can do is just like, and it's just like the feeling of the pain going away is a pleasure. But I don't know if that's exactly true. I could see it potentially being like, separate, like there's like an interconvertibility of like, taking away a joy becomes a suffering, taking away a suffering can become a joy, but also having them like separately, like spectrums of ecstasy and spectrums of like, pain removal. And it's depending on like how I've looked at, from what I've read, I think you can make a case for that, but, and then I also guess I'm wondering like, so these states though of like, radically, it's also how much does this like vary between and within people? So there isn't this one account, like, some people are much more, like in a, it's like a hungry ghost realm or something where it's like, like their experience is primarily one of like, much of my life has definitely been the case of like dealing with lack. But for others, it's like, it's a different life history. And it's like if like you're raised, it's like, could feel like moving just like deeper into harmony. And I guess like, and talking about like things like an enlightened being, like how much was that a state that nature ever encountered? Like, I don't know, like, is that like the feeling of like, what's it like to be like, I don't know, like an orange fleet cheeked like orang or like a silverback gorilla. Like they seem to have like this kind of like abiding like deep chill about them. Although I watch a lot of like their videos just because it's like it's soothing to me. But sometimes even they like you can see like they have rough days, and it's just like they're like, but like it's like a different thing. So it's like but like is that like this way of like this like a kind of like deep security and fearlessness, and it actually just feels more like moving into like following your bliss. Like I've heard like the silverback girls sometimes like they'll hum these songs, and then like they're kind of like and then like the entire troop will then like follow them around, and so it's sort of like I don't know, this guy's like choosing for the rest of them. Like it doesn't seem like necessarily he's like the song is like a mournful song. Maybe I don't know. I don't know these things, but like is it actually like a tuning into like what's the like what's the deeper harmony? Like, what is it like to be, is that something like the experience of what we call sometimes enlightenment for people? This is not things I know, but, those are some things that came up for me.
I think your earlier point of like, it's not just about like suffering or ceasing suffering to be happy and stuff, right? That's like the essence of Vajrayana, if I'm not mistaken, is like you can kind of go in that non-cessation direction and reach.
Yeah, I think along those lines, Marcus, just briefly, I think cessation along those lines is same word, same signified different, same word, different phenomena. It's the cessation of inappropriate relationship. I mean, that's the essence of the alchemy here. So in this case, cessation is used as a way. In fact, this is why I'm trying to invite this particular practice, because what this does is that alchemical practice of putting your hand over your heart and relating appropriately to the contents of your experience, just simply etymologically holding it. The root of the word dharma, D-H-R, means to hold, isn't to contain. There's a twofold expression here. One is to hold as in to cease from moving away and stop distracting, and also hold as in to nurture and contain. So when I mention hold yourself in the cradle of loving kindness, the cessation that takes place here is an invitation to proper relationship, which is eventually inviting a dissolution into the experience itself, finding the innate perfection. This is Dzogchen, finding the innate perfection in whatever is arising, irrespective of how you might interpret it from a particular developmental level. So
that kind of was what I was thinking earlier when we talked about desire and then kind of evolution and happiness and the need, like what Mahal said, so the kind of need to still engage in the world and not just fully distract, is that kind of emotional maturity of like, just because we're curious doesn't mean we're like maybe we're just misinterpreting the emotion as like I want or I want to desire, but if we had the nuance of our own perspective, then it wouldn't be interpreted as desire or having. It would just be a curiosity.
I think it's important to bring back the wisdom tradition's notion of the two truth doctrine. Recently, I've been fascinated by a term called metamodernism. And the metamodernism the meta is in the sense of metaxy, the Greek word. It means oscillation between two poles, between modern and postmodern. So I think oscillation between these two perspectives. One is the kind of primordial default blissful state that wisdom traditions often talk about. But also there is that unique self, unique individual in which we strive to understand more about the world, more about ourselves, more about diverse facets of happiness. And I think those can simultaneously be true. It depends. Shinsen talks about being a kind of amphibian, kind of modern amphibian, like a human machines, hybrid. Now we can switch between both of these perspectives, and this kind of oscillation between two poles, it kind of creates a kind of bigger space. So Andrew talks about, for instance, this idea. I coined the term perspective vessel. So if you're able to hold, let's say, a kind of uncomfortable feeling with a bigger perspective vessel, so it's kind of like our discomfort is kind of like adding salt to a cup of water. If our perspective expands, it's kind of like the cup of water becomes a big bucket of water. So if you add the same amount of salt, it still becomes saltier, but the degree of additive suffering, our reactions to the uncomfortable internal state and uncomfortable external perceptions, they become less and perhaps eventually infinite less, infinitesimally less. So that's why I thought, it's a good idea to be reminded of the two truth doctrine, as well as this idea in metamodernism of oscillating between two poles, metaxy, M-E-T-A-X-Y is a Greek word. Yeah.
Whose idea is modern modernism?
It's by it's a bunch of people. Metamodernism really emerged in the 2010s. And I think some people argue that it might be a more secular way to introduce people some ideas, let's say, in the integral philosophy.
Do they have much really solid scientific, you know what I mean?
Yeah, these people
Evidence.
are more kind of, they are more talking about artistic sensibility. So modernism they characterize as that there's kind of naivete, that there's everything tending toward progress, but that there's kind of sincerity. Postmodernism, they would argue that
so it's more it's aesthetic pole more than a hard science pole.
Right, it's kind of evolving. It's kind of evolving cultural movement. You can look it up in Wikipedia, metamodernism, and I think there are a bunch of Dutch philosophers who coined the term, and it's catching on more and more. Yeah, but I think the root word metaxy is metamodernism. There you go. Is I wanted to bring the root word of metamodernism. That is metaxy, metaxy.
Yes, metaxy is a huge philosophical thing in the world and in Buddhism, and that yes, there is a Greek word for it. And if Shikas and I were to start speaking Chinese, we could have a very interesting conversation because there's so many Chinese concepts mixed.
Yeah, it's like dialectics. Yeah.
It's basically, it's Zhong Dao, but it's also Bianzhang.
Yeah. So dialectics, middle way. Yeah, definitely. They're all kind of related. Yeah.
Yeah. But don't worry, we won't just speak Chinese. But what this guy says,
little Chinese slips in, it's not going to be the end of the world. What's the flow happen.
Listen to what this guy says. Listen carefully. He's probably the smartest guy in China.
No, you're exaggerating. You're definitely.
Yes, I'm exaggerating.
Daryl,
but not so much.
Daryl, did you have your hand raised, or were you about to say something? I thought you might have you look like you're about to speak.
Me or Andrew? Or sorry,
you too, but also Daryl. I thought I saw Daryl's hand go up at one point.
Should go first if he wants to speak.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, I wasn't asking to speak, but I've just been reading a little bit of Trungpa just recently, and this notion that this dissatisfaction he gives in his book, which is Spiritual Materialism. He gives a metaphor of a monkey trapped in a cage with 5 windows, which are the sense doors. And the harder that monkey fights, wants to get out, the stronger the walls become. And this really leads to hell realms of where desire is unfulfilled. And basically, the way to stop it is to stop fighting, just to not resist what is. And I don't know how that applies to this situation, but there's some of my metaphysical thoughts about desire.
I think, Daryl, if I might just add, he was my root teacher. And so he has a very provocative line here that's completely connected to this practice that I'm offering to you all, where he says so beautifully, there is no way out. The magic is to discover that there's a way in. This is the classic non-dual approach. And just to put a little exclamation point on what Shikas was saying, he mentioned integral theory. Postmodernism is somewhat connected to that. One of the characteristics of integral theory is that evolution, in that view, is actually marked by increased perspectives. And so this epistemic humility that you're referring to, William Blake talked about it how many hundreds of years ago with his notion of double vision. The ability to hold a non-binary, non-Boolean, more dialetheist way, inclusive way of holding absolute and relative in concert in relationship. with each other. And I think this is actually critically important. And so you have the ability to maintain this more evolved view for yourself, but skillful means, upaya, is literally meeting people where they're at, not where you're at. And that's a complete full recognition of the acknowledgement of relative truth. And so basically what we're doing here is a wonderful juxtaposition in Rinpoche's terms of joining heaven and earth, joining the relative and the absolute. This is a true contemplative scientist. The ability to hold both these perspectives at the same time, which is an incredibly important point. A type of what Shamil Chandaria talks about so beautifully leads to a type of intellectual ahimsa, the ability to have a nonviolent, peaceful relationship to all streams of knowledge and data acquisition, east, west, north, and south. And so this is the great gift of integral theory, and metamodernism, just to come back to that, is somewhat nicely tucked into that approach. So.
You said ahimsa? Was that the word you just used?
Yeah, the Jain term of nonviolence, intellect.
Broadly from India, all the traditions use it. Ahimsa paramadharma. Non-harm is the highest principle. Something like that. It's almost universal from India. Jain, Buddhist, Hindu, except the kind of Hindus that sacrifice goats and things, but that's another story.
Thinking of what Daryl just said in terms of like non-resistance or surrender in terms of non-violence. I'm remembering was it like an Eckhart Tolle, like him describing like his experience like at the beginning of Power Now. It's like at the point of like peak suffering and his like way of the cross. That there was like no outs, nothing like, and then just the impulse to resist collapsing. And they said like I heard a voice spoke as if from within, resist nothing. And then after that, he was Eckhart. Like he was like after that, he was just like the most chill mofo in existence. But yeah, yippee-ki-yay.
That sounds like a song from the movie Shaft. You say he'd be a chill mofo.
Chill mofo.
Watch your mouth.
Watch your mouth. Yeah, exactly.
I just wanted to say what she just said earlier about such a beautiful metaphor, and it reminds me. It's such a beautiful, such a statement. And I also about metamodernity, and I know sometimes we want to talk about things in terms of the framework of science, but where things can be framed in a way which we can, have access over it. But I think I like to quote Nietzsche again, that aesthetics are everything, and that's metamodernity is not really a systemic pattern that can be coupled or decoupled and used, but rather it's just a frame of mind of seeing the same set of things which are happening. I'm sure you could look at a piece of postmodern art and you could reframe it as metamodern and not change anything as to where the paint goes or where the sound or what the nature of the sound coming from the art pieces, but that it's really just the perspective of the viewer.
It's interesting we're bringing in the beauty or aesthetic or art dimension in the same conversation where we talked about Chogyam Trungpa's metaphor of walls that get stronger if you push against them. that's a new metaphor that works between something in the physical sciences and something in the spiritual domain that would be a component of a functor or a natural transformation, for those of you that are familiar with this language, connecting the science domain to the contemplative practice domain as a natural transformation, a component in a natural transformation. Sorry to get a little abstract, but that's where we're positioning this in quantitative science. So I have to say how I'm measuring shit. And I'm normalizing using pullbacks and push-outs. So we're talking science. Maybe not the most common form of science, but accepted mathematics, applied category theory. So the interesting parallel, and maybe we can get him to join in. I'd be willing to reach out, but others here could do the same, is Frank Wilczek. Anyone here familiar with Frank? Yes, I see Andrew and some others.
Nobel
maybe.
Prize winner.
Frank Wilczek is the definition of boy genius. Come on, he was like 20 years old and he got the Nobel Prize and he let his boss get the credit. And what a guy. Anyway, listen to his Royal Institution talks where he founds Nobel grade science on beauty and beauty alone. That's how they figured it out. They let the beauty of the math guide them. And what they figured out? The strong force. And what is the strong force? It's the walls that get stronger as you push out. It's the exact opposite of gravity that gets weaker. And they said, we can't figure out how the fuck this is. It's combinatorially too complicated, so let's just go with the beauty and assume that. And they were right at 20 years old. Anyway, he's invited now. You'll see him standing at the very desk where Faraday and Maxwell stood. Seriously? In the same room? In the Royal Institution? In the UK? And now, late in his career, he gets to make his, what they call Teisho in Zen, his report to his ancestors. Newton. Kepler. Yeah. So what's he going to say? He says, hey, in the end, it was all about beauty, and here's why. Well, I'm just saying it's very interesting that in the movie Interstellar, gravity is the force of love. That's the whole point of that movie. And in the actual science, what holds the atoms together is the inverse of bondage. It's the cohomology theory. Okay, I'm sorry, that was like way too geeky. Shikas, anything to do?
No, I don't really understand yet, but I have asked the AI about category
You asked the AI.
hundreds of times.
Yeah,
I definitely recommend people check out Love and Math by I think I forget his name. I think it was Edward Frankel. And
yes,
that introduces category theory to the general audience, and it's a bestseller. And also recently there's been the Langlands.
The Frankel that is associated to the Langlands program? That Frankel?
That's right, yeah. He wrote
He's talking on category theory now?
Yes.
I didn't know that, dude. That's amazing.
His 2013 book was introducing to the public audience the beauty of mathematics. Of course, I wish somebody, I think to a certain extent, most of us non-mathematicians were victims of a very poor math education.
Yes.
Math education that didn't cultivate the sense of awe, the sense of elegance, beauty, right? I think if somebody introduced the Euler's equation, e to the power of pi equals -1 to me, like when I was elementary school, I would have been much more curious about math, or in middle school, right? Or somebody told me about Ramanujan, that he discovered nearly 4,000 equations in like 10 years, and through the dream realm, and somehow some kind of goddess archetype just handed the equations to him. Now, we don't really understand what's going on now in the depth of the unconscious, what's going on with these prodigies, these geniuses. And I mentioned earlier that Maxwell, on his deathbed, he confessed that he didn't understand how the Maxwell's equation came to him. It just emerged in his mind automatically. And so there's a lot of mystery to be, to be understood. And evolution is the unfolding of the mystery. There's a concept that I kind of like by Stephen Wolfram. It's called the computation irreducibility. So we don't. There's just this unfolding, of the universe that we cannot predict beforehand. We can see that in cellular automata, even Rule 34. I mean, you can see the unfolding of unpredictable sequence. You cannot predict beforehand, before calculating, before computing. The fact that all of us are, as kind of semi-permeable biological organisms, all of us are kind of finite computing units. So if we want to predict beforehand how the universe will unfold, how evolution will evolve, we have to have the computing power of the entirety of the universe. So that's kind of the idea in the computational irreducibility. I think it's always the beauty of the mystery that's unfolding. I think we should be reminded more and more often with that. I think if more of us, are taught the beauty in math, in physics, and how they relate to perhaps a modern version of the Pythagorean impulse, where there is kind of this seeming unification between what is in the mathematical world, what is in the physical world, and what is in the mental world. And perhaps we have now a modern version of that. I recently learned this word, multi-omics. Now it combines genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, and also what's in the microbiome. So now the system biology perspective, So that perhaps could be added, an updated version of the Pythagorean impulse. I think there's just so much beauty in that. And I found that sometimes in spiritual tradition, we speak of duality as something that's somehow bad. But in sciences, duality means correspondence. We talk about the Langlands geometric correspondence program, and in physics, people talk about the ADS CFT, and the de Sitter space, conformal field theory, and there's correspondence. There's kind of unification going on there. I think there's just so much beauty to be found, both in duality and in non-duality. This oscillation between the absolute truth and the relative truth. And it's important to be reminded of Shinzan's differentiation, that to be equanimous doesn't mean that you are, quote unquote, equanimous about external circumstances. People often confuse that. We are more equanimous with our internal state, so that we have reduced amount of additive suffering, the kind of reactionary suffering that Andrew speaks so eloquently about. If we are more calm, we are able to act more effectively. So the things that we care about, it doesn't mean that we are somehow just nonchalant or don't react at all. That's often the impression that people get. I think Leonard Susskind, he talks about information as being differentiation. In spirituality, we often talk about as if there's only, we should always be unification, non-duality, as if different doesn't matter. But in wisdom tradition, for instance, in China, there's what's called the five. Sometimes you see in some temples that there are 5 Buddhas, so they stand for 5 qualities of wisdom. And I think in Western tradition, that's talked about a lot less often. And one of the Buddha is the Buddha of differentiation, is the capacity to discern. And in fact, in this world, we need way more critical thinking, particularly with AI, deepfake, and the ability to tell the subtle nuanced differences, and not just being able to see the unifying themes as well.
Trying to connect 2 concepts from earlier. I might be going overly shamanistic here, but something about what Zan just said, and then when Shinzen following up, we talk about the natural transformation. Like this, like, I guess I was, again, going back to my experience of stomach discomfort. And I was thinking, like, as you're talking about it, like, there's some sort of perspective shift you can have where then, like, the one way of, like, this one reality can get transmuted into another. Like, if you can get, like, this right, like, alignment and basis and perspective. Later, I want to have, like, a deeper understanding of, like, this idea of, like, a natural transformation. Because you've suggested, like, this is, like, a way of, like, thinking about, like, the alignment of systems in terms of, like, following this path. And it was, and not too long, I was wondering, I don't know if, both, because it's like the ultimate goal will be to have both like an abstract understanding of the concept, but then have it be like grokked in a way where it's like kung fu, where it's like instead of it being like an overlay, it's like, oh, that's what it's like to have my experience change in a way. I see how this natural transformation idea is like giving me a guide to how things are and can be different. So I think we should like dig in later into this idea. I'm not sure how much longer we'll have here, but I was wondering, maybe a few more comments. But like Andrew, if you wouldn't mind, before you leave, potentially leading us through a brief practice to kind of close off the discussion and bring us back again. Do you think you might have like a minute or 2 to do that, or would that be all right? Or
yeah, absolutely, sure. Just tell me when.
Okay, wonderful. So, I don't know, I guess like, we can keep digging in here, and I think, we, should keep digging in more. Like I've been neglecting the Slack, but I'm about to, join that soon. I was doing too much travel, and I was, finishing a book chapter in a grant, but, as soon as I come to equilibrium with my inner lamprey animal, I am my focus will return. But so I guess does anyone is there like a burning comment that anyone wants to like share right now, or
just saw Alex's hand up at one point, but I don't know if he's still interested in sharing.
Alex?
I'm interested definitely in saying hello, and no, whatever I was going to say is it's kind of gone with the wind, how it generally goes, but this is great. I will say, yeah, I was puzzling about, yeah, I think if I say it much more, it will bring it back the whole conversation we just had, and okay, I'll try to say it in one sentence. On the question of pleasure and pain, whether there's 2 things, and suffering, whether it's positive or negative. I mean, I guess my belief is that you can approach, there's really one thing, there's one infinite boundless thing, and you can approach it sort of from above or from below, which corresponds to heaven or hell. But my question is just, why is there even this sense of of there being two sides to the thing. It's not a two-sided thing. It's either a one-sided thing or an infinite-sided thing or something like this. So why duality, right? Is kind of my question. Maybe it's just multiplicity, but anyway, why any of that? So, okay, we can't resolve that right now. I would be grateful for a meditation session. Thanks for inviting me.
I could say something about that, Alex, that could tie into the practice I could guide you through. I think this is super important. If we associate duality with samsara and non-duality with nirvana, I don't think this can be overstated that samsara is a state of mind, not a state in reality. Duality is a state of mind. It's not a state in reality. And same in non-duality. And so what the practice I was actually going to guide you into, with your comments a little bit prescient, duality is a construct, and co-emergent with the very sense of self, co-emergent with that arises space, time, causality, those to which we collectively call the term duality. Duality is made up. It's a construct. And what you can actually see for yourself as a good microphenomenologist with practices like we're doing here is you can actually see moment to moment to moment how you contract. There's a fundamental narrative underneath all this. The contraction is an absolute iteration of egoic structure. And ego is what is actually created through the act of contraction. And so you can see how it is. You can feel how it is at moment to moment to moment. You create this dualistic world. And so the practice I was going to lead you into, this is one of the most, I think, brilliant things that Trungpa Rinpoche said in his introduction to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is beyond profound. The absolute experience of duality is the experience of non-duality. And so this ties in very beautifully to the experience, the practice that we're doing. The absolute experience of duality is the experience of non-duality. And so when you do this goofy hand over heart thing, what is it doing? It's inviting you to notice how you contract. It's inviting you to alchemically transform that contraction into openness. And as you do that, you realize on the spot that you can experience non-duality simply by opening the aperture of your awareness and realizing you're always already in the non-dual space. That's all there ever is. So I think this is really helpful to understand for a number of reasons. But in certain ways, this particular narrative ties in a lot of the threads that we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes. And so this goofy little simple practice can actually lead you to that because, again, it's an invitation to open to the contents of your experience so deeply that you dissolve into them. Like T.S. Eliot said, music heard so deeply it is not heard at all. You become the music while the music lasts. And so this goofy little practice is a fantastic way, moment to moment to moment, to actualize, to recognize the non-dual nature of your experience. That's all there ever is. Contraction is, and the duality that's born from it is basically a whiplash effect against colliding with the infinite and then colliding back into the self sense to create the very ego structure in that contraction. So something like that, a little long-winded.
It's amazing. I'm looking forward to this session now.
Guess let's dive in then.
Yeah, sure. Okay, wait. This again, it's just an invitation to go a little bit deeper to what we're already doing. I don't see any reason to add anything new, but maybe I can invite you to explore your soma, your being, your experience with some of these ideas in mind. So go ahead and close your eyes. Hand over heart. Without judgment, radically accept, say yes to whatever you're experiencing. And if the experience happens to be one of discomfort, like Adam's GI distress or emotional distress or the like. Notice perhaps the underlying contraction against unwanted experience, which right here is what transforms simple pain into complex suffering. Suffering is just an inappropriate relationship to pain, and that is something we can alter. This is real alchemy. This is taking obstacle, transforming it into opportunity by feeling into our contractions and opening to them. In paraphrasing Trungpa Rinpoche, you may notice this eventually if you do this practice, it's brought to some level of maturation. But whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, perhaps someday you will notice how this practice will lead you to the discovery that if you completely reverse your strategies to unwanted experience, go directly into them, if you become one with your pain, there's no one to hurt. There's just this intense, raw sensory awareness to which we append the label pain, experience, and then by implication an experiencer. By reversing your strategies and going directly into whatever you're feeling, the experiencer dissolves into the experience and both dissolve into non-duality. The absolute experience of duality is the experience of non-duality. That's it. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining today. It was so good to be with you and to just see all of your faces and just this came at a very good time for me. I needed this. And yeah, and I hope Doug's all right. I'll check in with him, but I'm looking forward to when he's ready to guide us. And Yen and Perry have something coming up that they're planning on guiding us through also, and also Shannon Dobson is ready, willing, and able to nerd out with you and Shinzen and Dalton on category theory. So we're gonna have a good mix of things coming up. But thank you everyone so much for being here, and I hope you all have beautiful weekends, and talk to you soon.
You, Adam.
Bye, Adam.
Bye, Mom.
Okay, bye, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.
Hi, Adam. Good to see everybody. Yeah. You are.
There's no more half an hour for people who want to stay.
Not today.
Not today. Okay, right.
My non-dual cultivation is not up to snuff with my inner lampreys vocalizations.
Well, you're assuming that non-dual cultivation is conditioned.
This is
your sentence.
That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think you're right. So good. But yeah, for me today, I think I'm going to lay down a bit.